Los Angeles, I'm and most Hollywood nights. She goes to California, oh, California.
What you say about Los Angeles?
LA got the people saying.
You're listening to Corner of the Galaxy on cornerofthegalaxy.com. Welcome to Corner of the Galaxy, the show that talks 100% LA Galaxy soccer. We're glad you could join us. Now it's time to sit back and relax as your hosts navigate through the twisting, turning, but never boring world of the five-time MLS Cup champion, LA Galaxy.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to Corner of the Galaxy on cornerofthegalaxy.com. I'm your host, Josh Gessman, coming to you on Thursday, October 26th. LA Galaxy done with the season. We haven't talked since that calamity ended on last Saturday. 4-1 loss to Dallas. We don't need to go over that game. There's lots of other stuff that we can talk about. We have exit interviews. We have end-of-season charts. We have roster information. We have already one player departed. You already know who that is. We'll talk about Doug here in just a little bit. So we have a lot of end-of-season stuff to sort of wrap up. I'm sure it'll be a good conversation. A lot of things to talk about. And to help me do that for the third time in a row, we like to keep him guessing all the time. It's Eric, the Portuguese Hammer Vieira. Eric, how does it feel to be on the show one more time that Greg Vanney has wins in a row?
It feels like getting 13th place in a competition.
Right.
Yeah, it feels like I did not have a good showing. It's not nearly enough to be considered good. But, you know, I'm not going to be called terrible things because I am consistently showing up to make my performances, even though they might not be great performances. So, yeah, it feels like 13th place. We did it, Josh.
We did it. 13th
place.
13th place.
We said this was going to happen, and it happened. So
do we really
shout out to us for speaking us into existence.
Do we really want a T-shirt that says 13th place? I mean,
No, we don't.
No, we don't. Nobody wants a T-shirt that has 13th place. You know, I remember I had to try to make this argument is that, you know, whenever the wooden spoon was, of course, captured by the LA Galaxy in 2017, Eric, and it came to live in my humble abode at my office, people said, why is it on the podcast every time? And I'm like, you know, because you need to remember those things. It's not that you want to remember them. It's that you need to remember them. You need to remember them, one, so that way you don't just brush past everything that has happened the year before. It's easy to just say, look at 2023 and what a weird season it is and just throw it away, right? You can do that. You could throw it away. And I know for some people's mental health, maybe that's what you need to do, right? But with like the wooden spoon, a T-shirt that says 13th would be a reminder that the LA Galaxy stayed in 13th place. By the way, I think the highest they were was 11th at one point, but it wasn't for very long.
Never above the playoff line.
Never above the playoff line.
Yeah, that's crazy.
Yeah, it is. I mean, it is one of those weird sort of things you look at. And by the way, having been a veteran of now 15 seasons of LA Galaxy soccer, I can tell you this was a weird one, dude. It was so weird.
Yeah, it was. And I think that's a fair assessment. I was watching some of the exit interviews. I'm going to be honest with you. I didn't watch the 3-hour, Gessman director's cut.
The super cut?
The super cut that you have. But I was watching some of it and going back, and I thought Greg Vanney did a great job recapping. He basically did a year in review on his first question, like moment by moment, game by game, where it went wrong, and when the injuries happened. And I thought he did a pretty good job of recapping it, almost like a photographic memory. I don't know if he rehearsed that, before he went out there. But when he was listing all of those things that happened, you're right. It was a weird one. And 13th place stings, and I understand your point about remembering your history, having it leave a mark. Right. It's we don't lose, we learn. You hear that a lot. And
did you hear Ricky Poosh? Did you get that far?
Did he say that?
Ricky says when you lose, you learn, and we had a lot of losing, so there was a lot of learning. Right.
Well, there we go.
Thank you, Ricky Poosh.
I don't know if that's one of those phrases that is getting tossed around more recently, but it's something that working in education is something that you work with kids. There's an opportunity to get it right, or there's an opportunity to learn from it. We don't know, no mistakes. You learn from it and you move forward. So I understand that wearing the Scarlet 13 would leave a mark and say that, we're not going to let this keep happening. But I was thinking about it too. I think why Galaxy fans are in such a weird spot is 2020, we can throw it away. 2017, you can throw it away. But we're starting to develop a pattern.
Yep.
2014 is going to be 10 years ago.
Yep.
Next season will be a 10-year anniversary of the last time that the LA Galaxy won an MLS Cup. So 10 years without an MLS Cup. And so now with the growth of the league, maybe as much as you want, and I don't know how this is going to make me sound, as much as you want to be, of course, winning MLS Cups, but not even sniffing it, I think is an issue. If you don't win the MLS Cup every year, I don't know that you can call that a failure. There are a lot of good teams that stay in contention. Right. You think about some, the Seattles and the, teams like that are always kind of in the mix, that they don't necessarily win every year, but they're close, they're in the mix. But the fact that the Galaxy aren't in it and they haven't been in it, and you keep missing the playoffs, 13th place, wooden spoons, historically bad, DP seasons, injuries, it's starting to stack up to a point where it's getting you're reaching a level to where, the fan base is almost like, woe was me. And it's such a crazy thing for a club that has so much history and so much winning tradition that comes with it to be, you're like the lovable losers. You're kind of like the, the Baltimore Orioles, or even, hate to say it, even like the Dodgers, where, hey, you just know when the big moment comes, they're going to fall on their faces. It's not a good feeling when you have the stench of a franchise. You want to feel good about your club, feel good about going to games, feel good about, seeing your team win, seeing them progress, make, playoff runs, living where I'm living now in North Texas right now. Everyone's abuzz with the Texas Rangers making the World Series. There's an energy to that. And you say what you will, if that's silly or if that's not silly, but it permeates the area wherever that team is emanating from, a buzz, a good feeling, good vibe. There's just something about it. And the Galaxy has failed to do that for now. It's getting to a point where it's getting frustrated, and you don't want to be part of that. And I think that's one of those things. Yeah, you can call it a weird season. There were a lot of injuries, a lot of weird things happen, but at the same time, this can't keep happening. 2017, 2020, decision day, go out, 13th place, never being above the playoff line. We went from the last time they were eliminated, where they were never below the playoff line and got eliminated. Right. Here, we were never above the playoff line. So
and didn't make it.
Yeah, these weird things just can't keep happening. At a certain point, you start to develop a pattern, and hopefully, next year's the year. Next year's the year.
Well,
Can we keep saying that?
Yeah, I mean, you can. I would also say that, if you group and lump everything together, that it does, it covers up some of the things where you're like, well, this team did have some momentum going. Actually, headed into this season, this team had momentum going. You had a playoff. You made the playoffs last year. You won a game, right? You got into it. Similar to what GBS did, right? Which was get in the playoffs and win a game, right? And it stopped with LAFC both times, right? So again, it feels like there's not momentum being made. I'll say, and I'll say this for everybody, and I was saying this on the Discord again, if you haven't been paying attention to what a train wreck the LA Galaxy front office has been since Bruce Arena left, then either I did a really bad job of explaining it, Eric, or you're a really bad listener. And I'm going to tell you right now, you're a really bad listener. All right, because we've been
short memories.
We've been screaming from the rooftops since Analfo left. Whenever Analfo left, we went and we came on here in 2017 at the end of the season, and we told you all about all the things that were wrong in the front office. And then we went into 2018, and after 2018, we did the same thing, right? Even though you got Zlatan in there and there was some momentum there. 2019, same thing, right? Everything was sort of going. We have watched this team self-sabotage themselves for years. And by the way, AEG and the LA Galaxy front office did it again this year. They sabotaged themselves. They shot themselves in the foot from the very beginning, right? And God only knows what would happen if there wasn't going to be a boycott going on. And we're going to talk about the boycott too, because the players were very open about sort of what they felt during this time. Greg Vanney had
we finally got some honesty about it. Yeah.
Well, and we've been getting hints of it. And by the way, whenever they were lying about it to us at the beginning of the season, we were all telling you on this podcast, it's affecting them. It's affecting them. Guess what? This whole thing is affecting them. And if Chris Klein goes, there will be a release that will lead to better play. and Chris Klein got fired, and there was a release to better play. Now, the injuries stacked up after that and a whole bunch of other things that you could sort of do it. It's not what you want to hear. It's not what you want to do. But again, the lack of quality front office decisions from basically 2017 or, since Kurt Onalfo, since Bruce Arena left, all the way up until probably this year. And even though bringing back Chris Klein was a whole thing, I would put that as an outlier for this year because Will Kuntz came in and you're seeing smarter decisions being made throughout it. Greg Vanney talked about seeing the results behind the curtain, what's happening behind the curtain. I think he said it after the Dallas game. There is stuff you see in front of the curtain, which is the results, and those things you have to get right. Eventually, it has to come. Otherwise, everybody gets fired, right? But the results behind the curtain, I actually agree with them. I think that they're stacking stuff together that could be really beneficial. What does that mean? That means that you should feel good about 2024, and I'll open with that. But that doesn't mean that anybody, if they don't come out and perform, people get fired next year. I mean,
you're not off.
Yeah.
You're and so I'm going to do my special thing where I speak out of both sides of my mouth. Next season does have hope, but it doesn't let you off the hook for this season. But also the fact that Vanney is coming back next year kind of lets them off.
Wait,
the
hold
hook
on.
For this
We could say
season.
breaking news, right? Because I've been telling everybody this for I don't know how many months. I've been like, he's not going anywhere.
Yeah, and we knew he wasn't going anywhere.
He's not going anywhere. Well, are you sure? Because all I see in my mentions is they're like, he's going to get fired. I'm like, no, he's not. He's here. He will be here for the start of next year. And people are like, I'll give him 5 games. I'll give him 10 games. I'm like, probably till the summer transfer window. No way. It couldn't possibly. Yeah, at least until the summer transfer window. That sounds crazy, I know, to people, but there's a rhyme and a reason for all of this stuff that's happening. Somebody, I think on our Discord said, if they lose 10, if they're winless in 10 games to start the season, right, then he's going to get fired. Well, Jesus. Like, again? What happened? What conspired to bring 10 games in a row without any wins again? Like what circumstances, what injuries do the LA Galaxy have? Remember, they have 2 open designated player spots. We'll talk about it here in a second. But
who would make the decisions to bring players in that
got
whoever's on the
already?
field that makes that possible?
Right? Yeah. It's just like, it's one of those things. It's like, let's speak in realities and not just hyperbole so much. So yes, go ahead. Sorry.
But I will say, if he starts winless in 10, he does need to go. You don't get till the summer. That's a no-brainer type of thing. I thought the discussion we were having is he going to get fired this season?
No.
And I think there is a difference between, does he deserve to get fired? Will he be fired? That's a different commentary and a discourse than he's definitely going to be fired if he doesn't, make the playoffs, or he doesn't, turn it around, or the team doesn't, look good towards the end of the season, that he's definitely going to be gone in the offseason. I think that's a different conversation.
If you were in charge, if you are Dan Beckerman, because Greg made a funny thing. We had, first of all, his entire press conference, just his section alone is over an hour. And then he spoke for another 40 minutes after the cameras went off to Scott French and Damian Calhoun as well, right? So Greg basically gave about 2 hours of his time to explain stuff, which, by the way, I don't know that you get that all the time from most coaches, right? And Greg knew he was coming in and doing that, but he made a point. He said, I don't hire and fire myself, so somebody would have to make that decision, right? And we're all like, oh, well, it's Beckerman, right? We've talked about this before, how it's stacked up. Tom Braun's not going to fire Greg Vanney. That's not how that works, right? So that is funny. But so if you were AEG, would you have fired Greg Vanney after this season?
I would not have. And this is where everyone's going to point and laugh and say, how can you say that after, being critical? But I sitting in that seat and looking at everything that happened, I do give him another season because of the circumstances that started this season with, Chris Klein in the front office and how that impacted the team with the amount of injuries that you have. And I do give him another season. Now that I have seen enough of a sample size from sub patterns and tactics and, from what he brings, that the spidey sense is tingling to where there's not a very long rope. And if it doesn't look good and the team isn't going in the right direction, that I think he's on a much shorter leash next season, because the first year you hire him, obviously he's not going anywhere, even if he had a, historically losing season. The second year you hire him, makes the playoffs. Of course, you're not going to fire him in that regard. So the third year, a down year, as bad as it was, with everything that happened, I think he does deserve another chance. But I have seen enough to where I'm not thoroughly impressed. And maybe if I am AEG and I'm making those decisions, maybe I do have feelers out and I'm asking, we've had this discussion. I'm asking Will Kuntz to go on the super secret undercover mission, to look, vet head coaches and kind of see who's available, because obviously Vanny's not going to, like you said, replace himself. But so that's my take on it. I do give him another year if I'm in that seat to give him a chance, but with the understanding, hey, this is the year. The results need to speak for themselves at some point. And I think, to your point about Vanney giving 2 hours of his time and really going in depth and recapping it, I think that's also a product of him knowing that he's somewhat on the hot seat, that the club is not in great shape. This was not a fun season for people. And I think he needs to justify it. This happens to us as podcasters. Whenever you're in a hole, let me talk my way out of this. Wait, no. Just give me a few more minutes to explain. Right. And I think if everything was great, I don't think you get 2 hours from Greg Vanney. Well, I think with everything that went wrong, him justifying his position, justifying his decisions, picking apart the season on little handball calls and VAR calls, where it went wrong, where this went wrong. I think that's why you get such a lengthy conversation, and it's a valuable conversation, is because it's a product of him knowing I need to defend myself. I need to justify why I'm the, someone asked him, is he the right guy for the job? I don't know who that person was, but that's why he's having that discussion, because he knows he needs to justify that.
I'll say this. I've had on record and off record conversations with Greg Vanney before, and he's usually, quite honestly, I did expect him to talk for as many hours as he did. He just likes it. It's him. It is him. You saw him be emotional after the Dallas game. I know we didn't even talk about that. But I was sitting in the room and I saw a guy who, had tears in his eyes, and he's like, he's a guy who's not used to failing like this. And for a season that was emotionally charged, mentally draining, I can understand the release at the end of this. And what does it say about Greg Vanney? It says that he's an individual who cares about how he's viewed and cares about the results of the team. And I'll tell you right now, I don't consider that performative at all. I think that's honest and genuine. And I think that, as he said, because he answered my question, I got to ask a fun one in an exit interview question, is that nobody cares about this team more than he does. And that's something to say. I tend to believe it. Everything that Greg Vanney talked about in different ways, I tend to believe in most ways. I can pull apart things and I can say stuff. And I think we've done that, where, Eric, you and I have talked about results in front of the curtain, behind the curtain, and that's great. But, it's the Chris Klein argument, which is, look at all the stuff you don't see that I'm doing. But even though it's not having a positive effect over here, right? It's like you eventually get it. Everybody knows that eventually the results have to come. And I think that 2024 is that year. Everybody I've talked to on the record, off the record, in the LA Galaxy organization, one person said they were embarrassed by the fact that they didn't make the playoffs. I thought that was just showing. And by the way,
join the club.
Yeah, I know, right? But the fact that, nine teams make it, somebody called it, cataclysmic that they didn't make the playoffs. Like, how can you not make
There's a team in 19th place in the Supporters Shield standings that was in the playoff picture.
Yeah, Charlotte, right? Charlotte was actually, I think Portland finished above Charlotte in terms of points per game and all that stuff, but still got
Charlotte was in 19th place, made the playoffs. Portland in 18th place in Supporters Shield, but did not make the playoffs.
Yeah, didn't make it. Actually, the Galaxy could have helped Portland out by beating Dallas, and didn't. So I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing, depending on how you like Portland. But what I'm saying is that everybody knows, and everybody has been talking about 2024. Greg Vanney said something that says that he said that this team of people working behind has never been more proactive than they have been. And I know that they've been talking about 2024 since June, probably.
Probably since Chicharito was injured, to be fair.
In a lot of ways, right? And how they're planning. But the planning has been advanced in all those ways. So let me get to the super chat so I can actually scroll down to the bottom of the chat, because I've been sitting it here at the very front. I have no idea what people are saying underneath. This is probably a good thing.
Well, while you scroll, let me just finish one thought, because you did mention you felt that none of it was performative. And so when I'm saying that, that part could have been part of the reason, I don't believe he's putting on a show or he's putting on a performance. I want to clarify that I don't think he's trying to, and I've seen some comments, in the chat about it being a ruse and a con man, that type of thing. I don't think he's trying to get anything over. I think he's being honest and he's explaining himself, but he does have, as they say in I Love Lucy, he's got a lot of explaining to do, So, and that's why, you get these lengthy responses. To your point, he likes to talk, and you've had these conversations where they are going to go long. But I think knowing that the lights are on, I'm not saying it's performative, but there was a lot to recap and uncover.
There is.
And that's why you got so much,
There is.
so much meat on that bone your
I would
3-hour supercut.
Yeah, by the way, super chat. Lasso's Optimism, $10 super chat. Good evening, gents. Looks like Doug is gone. Cheech is on his way. Ricky's happily staying. And Griezmann is on his way, right? Let the healing begin from our favorite optimist. Yeah. Lasso's Optimist is in there. So
I was going to say that the name's not just a gimmick. It's not Lasso's Optimism for nothing.
That's right. Actually, one of my favorite accounts, by the way, because I enjoy a little bit of optimism on occasion. Philip,
we appreciate you, Lasso.
Yeah, there's too many people who deal in absolute negatives for me to really glom onto that. I am a glass half full guy at heart. So Philip, by the way, gave us his $2 super chat. Says Vanney out if Galaxy lose the opener 5-0. Won't matter what the score is. Hate to break it to you. I know, but not even in like 23-0. I don't know, 23-0. Do you fire everybody? Do you? Hey,
no.
What has
game,
to happen?
It's only 0 points.
Right, it's 0 points. Who cares? You just lost 3 points.
You're only 3 points behind the supporter shield.
But your goal differential starts at minus 23, so that's a problem.
Yeah, but still.
Yeah, it was really interesting there. I mean, let me take you behind the scenes just a little bit of what happened on Monday. Because I want you to understand why there's a 3-hour and 22-minute video on the Corner of the Galaxy YouTube page that talks about LA Galaxy interviews, and it basically is every interview as uncut as I can make it, because I actually get given the videos. So, I mean, for the most part, it's the full interview. I can tell you I've listened to all of them now twice. So I can tell you that it's pretty uncut. I may have, when you couldn't hear a question at the front, I didn't necessarily save that because it's not going to do you any good to not hear the question. The two guys who were in the studio talking to those guys in person were Scott French and Damian Calhoun. And then I think on the phone it was myself, or on Zoom I should say, it was myself, Alex Ruiz, Mike Gray, and Rob Halone. Rob, is it Rob Jaylen? Rob, I never know how to say your last name. I
was going to
apologize.
say it's definitely Halone. If I had to guess.
Jalon. Jalon.
One of our buddies there, but it's definitely not Jalen. I can tell you that much.
I apologize.
Robbie Jalen. That's the host of the.
I just know Rob. I just know Rob. That's all. So I believe that was everybody. Charlie Boom Boom. Charles Bohm was on there as well. So
Charlie Boom Boom's a heck of a nickname.
You don't know about Charles is the best, man. I love Charles.
I mean, I'm familiar with the Twitter account. I follow, right. But I didn't know Charlie Boom Boom was a thing.
So I've told you the story about Charles and just kind of what a cool dude he is. Like, he's one of those guys that if you haven't seen him for 5 years and then he's like, hey, you want to go grab a beer? You go and grab a beer because you're like, yeah, I want to hang out with that dude. I met Charlie whenever he came out for an MLS Cup. And it was just like sort of, I was in a group of people that he was in a group of people, but we knew each other the whole deal. And last time I was in Washington, D.C., not this last time, but the last time I actually got to go to the city, he hit me up on Instagram and was like, hey, you want to grab a beer with beer? And I'm like, yeah, let me dump my wife and kids and head on out. So I went out and had a drink with Charles Baum. We're going to see when we can get the show back. All right, I think maybe we're back. Hey, chat, we'll get you guys here in a couple seconds, hopefully. All right. Well, that's always fun whenever the computer just shuts. Literally, it went error, and then I got a blue screen, and then everything died. All right, so I think that's really what the issue was. Okay, I have no idea what the issue was.
I was gonna say the chat's having fun. This is almost better without.
Okay.
Yeah, without everything.
All right.
Let's just keep chatting.
What were we talking about in the chat?
We're talking about Charlie Boom Boom.
Charles Bohm is a man of a few words and many mysteries. He's kind of like I don't know. He's almost like mythical in a lot of ways. He's just a good hang. So Charles is a great dude, and I always appreciate him. But he was on the call as well. So that's the behind the scenes. Yes.
And the point that I was going to make is that is why the league is so great. It's the relationships that are built. It's kind of being in on it with the Euro snobs and whatnot.
Right.
Saying, well, MLS isn't quality. Messi's going and just, tearing up the league. What a low quality league. That's not what it's about. It's about the people who make up these communities and are part of that. That's what makes,
Wait. I want the line.
Fun.
and the friends we made upon the way, right? That's isn't that how it works?
That's what it's all about.
That's
Where's
what
Lasso's
it's all about.
optimism?
There it is.
To make the Pollyanna reference. Here we go.
Oh, good Lord. All right. So anyway, so that's that was behind the scenes, right? You had the guys in the studio, the guys on Zoom. Now, this started at 8:45 a.m. in the morning, which is early. Just like to let you know, for a press conference, most sports reporters don't get out of bed until 10, 11 o'clock in the morning, because they've been up till 1, 2, 3 o'clock in the morning doing everything else, right? So getting there at 8:45 a.m. is early. The players were there. We basically laid out a list. Somebody said, oh, well, the Galaxy only made players available they wanted to make available. Actually, we gave them a list, and they made as many players on the list as available as they could. Obviously, we asked for Chicharito. He didn't show up there. And it was short notice.
That's interesting, though.
I thought he should have been there, right? Douglas Costa was there. Ricky Puig was there, right?
And we had this conversation on last week's show. Is he going to show up to Fan Appreciation Day? And he did.
Yes, he did.
So
as a matter of fact,
I got in his ear or what? Yeah.
I went into the post-game press conference, and I was sitting there, and we were waiting for Greg, and it took a little while because everybody was out on the field, so it was going to take a while for people to come in. So the reporters got to talk, and I'm like, oh, well, see, Chicharito didn't even show up. And then I was like, oh, maybe I should ask, being I didn't see him. It doesn't mean he wasn't there. And so I asked, and they're like, yes, he was. He was there. And then I saw pictures and video of him afterwards, and he was there. So he was there. He did the whole fan appreciation thing. We can talk about that here in a second. I think that'll be a good thing to talk about.
But
as
not
we go.
Not at exit interviews.
Not at exit interviews, right? And so basically we gave them a list, and they made as many of those people available as we could. I think the ones that we missed were probably Jonathan Bond, Dejan Joveljic. Now, Dejan Joveljic, interestingly enough, apparently left Saturday night whenever he was right after the game. He went on a plane and he went home. Right, that was always his plan. Now,
Serbia home.
Right, Serbia home. Yes, Serbia home. Not wherever he lives in the South Bay. Probably. Yeah. I don't know where he lives, but I'm guessing it's in the South Bay, right? But there was
Manhattan Beach for sure.
There were people having mild heart attacks today whenever he posted on his story that it said moving day, and he had the name of the movers, and everybody's like, he's moving today. I'm like, no, he's already gone. He's been gone. He has not been. He's not here, folks. He hasn't been here. That's a story he saved and then put in for later, right? So I'm sure that was part of a promotional deal of some sort, right? that he was pulling out. But where is he going? He's going home. It's okay.
I was going to say, this makes me think that I do need to visit Serbia, because between him and between Nikola Jokic from the Nuggets, that guy won an NBA championship and could not want to get home faster. He didn't even want to go to the championship parade. He's like, I just want to go home, be with my horses. And Joveljic on Saturday night, he's ready to go home. What's going on in Serbia?
They have a lot of horses.
I need to investigate. Yeah.
I don't know, but no, I mean, he wanted to go home, and so he was gone. So now we did get answers from him. We did get actual notes from him. I posted some of those on there. But basically, Joveljic says, I expect to be back next year, which he has a contract. So it's one of those that we can sort of talk about now. Contract-wise, and how we sort of know all this thing, the list that you see up in front of your screen, and if you're listening on the podcast, the list that I have is 1 through 32 players. This indicates a monumental change in how MLS has been going for the last 15 seasons I've been covering it. Do you know why this is so different from every other year, Eric?
Why?
Because thank you for playing along. Because I have the contract information for every single player on here. We actually know.
It's not speculation.
It's not speculation. We missed a. I think Uri Rosell has an option, and we missed that on my list, and I changed it. Right, that type of thing. But that's how close we are to getting a full, absolute list of every single player. And by the way, it's part of MLS now to announce contract information, so we get that whenever it comes. But there were some I was missing here that I had to do a little digging for that eventually got up here, and now I have it. So I have 32 players for the LA Galaxy. Remember, you're allowed to have 30, but with the season-ending injuries and all the other stuff that was sort of going on, and they moved some guys down to G2 and other things, that's how they're able to have that 32 on the list and all that fun stuff, right? So we know right now that the LA Galaxy have 17 players whose contracts are either up or are on options, right? And that's sort of where we take most of this stuff and where we can learn that. So we knew for the first time going into exit interviews, Eric, we didn't have to ask, so what's your contract status? Because that used to be number one question in exit interviews are, what's your contract status? And they're like, oh, I have a contract for this until this. And you're like, okay, well then do you expect to be back next year, right? There was all this whole like sort of rigmarole that you would go through in order to try to find out. And some guys, if they didn't want to tell you, they didn't have to tell you. Right. So it wasn't like it was one of those things that'd be like, I'm not going to discuss my contracts. And it's like, oh, okay, well, then I guess we'll never know. Right. It would have just been Nothing. So now we know.
Remember the Ola Kamara situation where, so I think someone mentioned his extension or his bonus or something like that, and he's like, "Oh yeah, how did you know that? Because I wasn't going to share that information." So even situations like that where they're even surprised that people know that information.
Well, remember Chicharito yelled at us, I think earlier this year, or maybe it was earlier last year, whenever he was like, "Yeah, of course you guys know I have a contract for next year. I hit my options and blah blah blah."
Yeah,
and we're like,
didn't everyone know I
we
needed
have
to
no
score
idea.
6 goals?
Yeah. No.
Yeah, in training, and then I'd be invited back. Yeah.
Yeah, I had to stand on my head for 5 minutes, and then I'd be invited back. So, so that's sort of where we go. So what we can tell you is from this list, we know Javier Hernandez, Douglas Costas, both out of contract. Michael Barrios out of contract. Caligari out of contract, but he was on loan, right? So really it's the end of his loan.
Unique situation.
Right, exactly. Costa out of contract. Jonathan Bond, or I'm just giving you the people who are out of contracts. Uri Rosell has an option. Tyler Boyd out of contract. We've been talking about that a lot, so you should know that one already. Kelvin Leardam option. Billy Sharp option. Jonathan Klinsman option. Edwin Cerrillo out of contract, but he's going to sign a new contract. We've already talked about that multiple times. So he's going to be back. He's going to sign a new contract. Tony Alfaro has an option. Adam Saldana is out of contract. That's an interesting one, too, if you want to get into like the lower level stuff and talk about contracts and where he's going. So Adam Saldana is on the hot seat sort of right now about whether or not he'll be brought back. Daniel Aguirre has an option. Preston Judd has an option. Mitrovic, his loan has ended, right? And then Gino Vivi has an option. Okay, he has 3 club options. He's one of those guys who has like every club option, right? It's like 1 year deal, 3 club
pick
options.
A card. Yeah.
Right. So, so that what it is. That means that we know people who are coming back right now. Ricky Puig coming back. Gaston Brugman coming back. Diego Fagundes coming back. Maya Yoshida coming back. Mark Delgado. Dejan Joveljic. Jonathan Bond. Chris Mavinga. Raheem Edwards. Julian Alde. Jonathan Perez. Or I should say Johnny Perez. I just have him as Jonathan Perez. Marcus,
I was gonna say,
who's
his
this
government
Jonathan?
name? What did he do?
Yeah, right. Marcus Vercranis, Jaylen Neil, Mauricio Cuevas, and Eric Zavaleta. Oh no, not Eric Zavaleta. Oh god,
He's back, baby.
Oh god. By the way, I have been giving Eric Zavaleta too much credit on this podcast, and I apologize. He doesn't make $87,000. He makes $85,444. So, just in case you want to get real angry at night, blaming Eric Zavaleta for all your own problems, why you got fired at work, all the other things, that's that. Then you can go ahead and do that for Eric Zavaleta. He's right there, and he will be back for next year in 2024. All right. So that's sort of where we stood heading into this. Now, we also never talked about salaries. And for the most part, nothing. You didn't really need to know much about the salaries, except that a couple of guys who had just joined the league, we didn't know, right? So it was guys like Billy Sharp, who you didn't quite know how much money he was making, and he's making about $240,000. Now, he didn't make $240,000 whenever he joined the LA Galaxy this year.
Yeah, it's prorated, yeah.
It's prorated. It's for the year, right? So he made not even like half of that probably whenever it all comes down to it. So Billy Sharp is one of them. And then another one is Maya Yoshida. Maya Yoshida at 800 or almost 900 whenever you take his guaranteed and everything else that is in there, right? And so that was interesting because he really was replacing Caceres, and Caceres was making about $500,000, right, in that range. And so there is quite a pretty big bump for Yoshida at $800,000. I have no idea. People I saw in the chat room, people are like, "Oh, people are worried about Yoshida and whether he's overpaid or not." And I'm going to say I have no idea because I don't really think I've gotten a real good fix on him, being he played with every center back the LA Galaxy had, and then some they didn't have who they traded for and brought in and then also played him with, right? So
I'll say it. I'll say it. For what Caceres brought to you at $500K, I don't know that Maya Yoshida is worth a $300K bump investment. I don't know to me, the shades of difference don't warrant that. That's not to say that Yoshida, isn't going to be the starting back line and his leadership isn't invaluable and what he can bring in that experience is not important. But I feel like Caceres can bring the same thing. So I'll say that. And that's not to say that he maybe it is saying he's overpaid, but I'm just saying the difference in pay, I don't see
him being that much better.
Him being that much better
right.
to where, to fill in that role. But if you've established that you need someone in the Martin Caceres role and need to get someone, there's not tons of those guys around. So if you need to pay a little extra to make sure you have that guy, then I kind of understand, wanting to make that move for Yoshida, knowing that, Caceres could be on his way out.
I am I'm not necessarily. I'm not concerned. Show me next year, right? Next year will be my barometer on that. If he's lights out with everybody else on the defense, then guess what? They're all worth the money because of the way the Galaxy bled goals. And I think we did jinx them on the last podcast. We said they'd have to allow 4 goals in order to get to 67, and they did just that. So
that last game. Did we even recap the Dallas game?
We don't really need to recap
the
the Dallas game. I was trying to go through. I have the goals in here somewhere. Let me see. Is this the one? The goals. LA Galaxy goals scored. So 51. Average, by the way, for every LA Galaxy team is 50.5. So the LA Galaxy were technically above average this year on scoring goals, which is crazy to think, being they weren't scoring any goals at the beginning of the year, right? And that they came back. And really it did flip-flop because I thought the defense was better at the beginning of the year and the offense was worse, and then it went the other way, and Vanney even said in his thing, he goes, maybe we gave up too many goals in search of getting goals. He goes, but I don't think that was really the issue. And then he goes, there was a whole bunch of issues there.
Both sides of the field were never in sync at the same time. And I think that's something. One of my takeaways from listening to the exit interviews and what Vanney was saying is the consistent starting 11 and the importance of that, and asking the question, what was the barometer of like, what was our best 11? And then how do the teams compare to that? I don't know that you ever saw the best 11
correct
on the field once.
Vanney said that.
He mentioned, that was my takeaway. I'm repeating what he said. He said maybe it was like a 5-10 minute stretch where you had your best possible 11. So how can you compare anything when you never saw what the finished product could have been?
20. Now Vanney claims it's 20 minutes. I've yet to do the research, and I don't think anybody has really questioned this yet. We tried, and it's a difficult one to research because you have to try to find all 3 designated players playing on the field.
He didn't say it out of nowhere.
Yeah, exactly. I would trust him, but basically it was the Austin game, and I think the last 20 minutes of the Austin game, Douglas Costa came in and he was playing with Chicharito, with Puig, and that was the 20 minutes that the LA Galaxy got all 3 designated players on the field at the same time. That was it. That's all that ever happened. So that's really interesting to sort of look. And by the way, we can go to the designated player in the DP minutes that we had. Right here it is. Chicharito Hernandez played less than 25% of the total available minutes, 22.5. Douglas Costa finished under 40% for the season of total available minutes. Ricky Puig 82.5%. By the way, Ricky's fine, and that's where you should expect him to sort of be in a lot of these. 2023 now ends at 48.3. So as long as I've been keeping records, the least amount of minutes played by designated players for since 2018. I only have them for 2018, but that's pretty incredible whenever you look at all those things, right? So we go to exit interviews. So this is why we were there starting at 8:45. We did not get done until after 105, 107, something like that. So it was like 4 hours, 3 hours and 22 minutes worth of video that you see, but that's whenever you stack them, like the one person is right behind the other person. And a couple times we had to wait a little
transition
bit.
time.
Yeah, we had to wait a little bit in between people coming and that type of thing. So, if you go to the LA Galaxy, I really wanted to scare everybody and go, okay, let's talk about the LA Galaxy interviews. We're going to go question by question and go through all.
I was going to say, right? I'm on Central Time. This is an issue. Yeah.
Yeah, it very well could be an issue, right? So, we won't make it that long. I do implore you to. And I have had some people who listen to all of it, and I think it's really educational if you do listen to all of it. I will tell you, if somebody asks me, like, who should I absolutely listen to? Absolutely listen to Greg. Duh. That one's easy, right? Absolutely listen to Ricky. Absolutely listen to Tyler Boyd. Listen to Mark Delgado. Now, Mark is this strange cat kind of guy. He's slower with his answers than everybody, and you would think that would be annoying. But when you watch Mark Delgado and you watch him think and you watch him ponder, you're getting real answers from Mark Delgado, right? There's nothing canned. He's not reacting real quick. He's taking the time to understand the question. A lot of times he's even
processing.
He repeats the question. Like he's sort of like, oh man, what about this season? And I think like
it's a technique.
The opening side of his thing was, man, it was weird. It was strange. right? That's Mark Delgado, but it's totally worth listening to. I had somebody, Andrew from LA Riot Squad, said that I said listen to Mark, and he was like, totally worth listening to Mark. It's great. He gives really great answers. Listen to Eric Zavaleta. 100% listen to Eric Zavaleta. It's funny because there's like 12 interviews, and I've given you like more than half of them. Like, who are the ones you have to listen to?
You're basically saying, but I'll give this piece of advice. This is what I did. Obviously, I haven't listened to the whole thing, but if you're listening to a podcast, so you obviously, if you're hearing this, you like to, listen to people speak in the background or while you're doing something, throw it on. It's like lo-fi beats while you're, if you're a work from home person, you throw it on in the background, listen to it as you're getting some work done, as you're cleaning up around the house, getting some chores done. It's an easy thing to do in the background. So 3 hours sounds daunting, but just like any podcast or anything, I think it is worth the listen. If you're as diehard of an LA Galaxy fan as we are, and it's why you're here, then right. I think it is worth going and listening through. You're mentioning, your highlights, but listen to the whole thing. I think everyone who did speak, I don't think there were anyone, if the people who, the Zavaleta fan club who may not be thrilled about him being out there. I still think it's valuable to hear the amount of minutes that he got down the stretch. You want to hear that perspective on what he was going through as well. So I would recommend listening to the whole thing, even though you're shouting out your highlights.
Let me play a couple things. Let me play Tyler Boyd, because I think Tyler Boyd's a really good one to listen to, but I can pull some audio from here. We don't have to listen to it all, but I want to hear you, Tyler Boyd. Tyler Boyd is out of contract. We told you he was on a year contract. There were no options. This is it. This was Tyler Boyd's chance to come back from Turkey and sort of come in and be like, I can still play. And
I still got it. Mm-hmm.
It was a gamble for him, Eric. It was a gamble for him to do this, but he came in on a 1-year contract and basically said, I want to show you that I can play. And he did, and now he's looking at a payday.
I was going to say, I'm ready to give you the verdict. He can. Yes, yeah. He's still got it, and the Galaxy should be interested in making sure that he comes back.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's see if we can hear from Tyler Boyd just a little bit.
Yeah, it was a dream come true. I've always wanted to play for this club, so coming here has been a blessing, and I never took it for granted. Each time I put on that shirt, I tried to do my best, tried to play for the fans, play for the history of the club. So it was definitely a dream come true, and I hope to play many more seasons for this club. So I think it wasn't a dream as far as not making the playoffs. That was very disappointing, but it'll taste that much sweeter when we do have success in the future. So I think setbacks make the victory even better.
So there you go. Setbacks make the victory even better. That's Tyler. Now, Tyler Boyd, who was asked, he said, basically that they are in talks with the LA Galaxy. I think, here's the thing, and we talk about that maybe this isn't true anymore, but Tyler Boyd grew up watching the LA Galaxy. He wants to play on this team. So Greg Vanney said about Tyler Boyd, he said, you never know what the expectations are of the player and of the agents, right? Like maybe he's like, well, I want $3 million a year. And it's like, okay, well then Tyler Boyd's not coming back, right? Until he can find somebody, he's going to find somebody who's going to pay him that. But I think if everything's reasonable, Eric, I think that there's a very good chance that Tyler Boyd comes back and wants to come back and play for the LA Galaxy. He likes Greg Vanney. You want to talk about common threads that we heard throughout this? Now, I know I'm going to hear people say, oh, well, what else are they going to say? To a player, everybody talked about Greg Vanney and sort of what he's meant to them, what he meant this season, and they talked about how he guided them through this season. Greg Vanney talked about guiding these guys through the season. One of the most interesting things I think I heard Greg Vanney say, at least for me, because I've heard most of everything else before and I expected all the other stuff, but he talked about not knowing when to lean on the guys, right? Like come into the locker room and throw chairs, and not knowing like when to take pressure off. And he was constantly in this battle of, do I lean on him or do I take pressure off? Do I lean on him or I take pressure off? Think about that first half of the season when the Galaxy can't win a game. They keep trying, right? They started the year with injuries. The first game didn't go off against LAFC, right? Things are just weird. There's a supporter boycott going on, right? All these things are stacking up. Like there's part of you, I'm sure, as a coach that says you guys aren't listening to what I'm telling you, you're not doing, and there's a want to come in there and throw a chair across the room and rack some brains. Remember how much pressure was on them at that point, right? Do you think him yelling and throwing chairs fixes those problems? I don't know the answers to this. I'm just sitting there in the scenario, which none of us have to make. We don't get to make those decisions, Eric. That's a tough scenario. If you've ever been in part of a team, it's a tough scenario.
if you've ever been a parent of a child or of multiple children, that's why I'm kind of giggling and laughing. Our favorite thing is to compare ourselves to professional athletes and professional coaches. I think about having conversations with my children and coaching teams, and it's really difficult knowing when to lean in and say, what I'm saying is correct. You're not executing. At what point do you need the tough love? At what point do you need the soft touch? Hey, you're doing great. Let's just, support you doing it. There's a psychology to that, and as silly as it sounds, comparing, parenting your preteen or your toddler or whatever it is, it's not that different. People are people, whether they're little people, whether they're playing professional sport, they're personalities that need to be massaged and knowing when to pull on the levers and push on the levers. This is why you hear, when people talk about Bruce Arena and his greatness of man managing, the tactics for those who were around for the, tail end of Bruce's tenure with the Galaxy, sometimes the tactics were the reason why people weren't necessarily thrilled with, but that wasn't the reason that he was being successful.
Nope.
There was a whole psychology behind it. And so it just makes me laugh that it's easy to say, well, the team should have been doing that, or why doesn't Vanney implement his system? Why aren't if he has the system, why aren't they doing that? It's not easy. And so when you sit back and look at that and divorce yourself from the, fandom and what's right in front of you, why don't you just do it? It's you have all the answers to the test. Why aren't you just doing it? It's not that easy. So it's one of those things that's easy to armchair quarterback from the sidelines here, but when you're in it, it is really tricky, and it's important to hear those perspectives from Greg Vanney and from the players as well.
Yeah, and so Tyler Boyd is one of those guys. I could play. You could go listen to it. He talks about Greg Vanney. He talks about how detail oriented. I heard from multiple players about Greg Vanney how much he prepares them for matches. Like, they never feel like they're going into a match unprepared. Which sometimes you're like, really? Because it looks like you guys are unprepared. But that's
he didn't mean the last game, did he?
Right. No, I'm sure. Probably not. Well, the players, and even the players came out in some of these interviews and said, listen, obviously the coach is going to get a lot of the blame. He goes, but I can't remember if it was Zavaleta or for someone else. It's like, but the players have to perform. Like, they have to get out there and do it. And a lot of times we didn't do that this year. We didn't put ourselves in the right positions to do. By the way, Logan.
Realist.
Yeah, exactly. Logan gives us a $2 super chat. Is Jorgen Shelvik off the books yet? Maybe. I don't know. It was a long one, wasn't it? He was like extended out for multiple years, if I remember correctly, and like a whole bunch of stuff.
I don't know what the deal was, but that one was a weird one. I think because he's not on your chart.
Right.
I think you would have kept him on the chart if you would just for the joke. Yeah, for the joke, because what that would mean. But I don't think he's technically on the roster anymore. But to wrap up the Tyler Boyd piece of it all and him being re-signed, all those comments about him saying we didn't live up to the expectations. I just mentioned that's him being a realist. I don't think he's going to ask for a DP contract or for millions of dollars. I think he kind of knows where his range is. And to what I was saying about Joveljic, and we were joking about, not leaving his, home to go somewhere else. It's Serbia home, living in the South Bay. The players seem to like the lifestyle around here.
Yep.
You can ask Chicharito, ask Douglas Costa. And I mentioned those two players because then you talk about maybe not being a realist so much and thinking that you're at a level that maybe you're not still at. I think Douglas Costa and Chicharito may fit that mold to where, settling for a non-DP contract or anything outside of that, it's not in their mindset. Whereas someone like Tyler Boyd, I could feel like, he could ask for a DP, but I don't know he's going to get tons of offers or be put in good situations.
No.
So I want to put that to bed. I think, it's probably going to be reasonable within range.
I'm gonna put the range. I'm gonna put the range at between $500,000 and $700,000. That's where I'm gonna put it. I think that's probably reasonable. By the way, Mark Delgado is in there at $750 and that type of thing. I know people love to rag on Mark Delgado. One of the reasons the LA Galaxy absolutely bled goals is because Mark Delgado wasn't in the position he was whenever Brugman was playing. It was like a shift of things that happened, but when Brugman was in there, Delgado was able to sit in front of the back four, and that helped the back four a whole bunch. When Brugman wasn't there, Delgado didn't get to sit there as much, and then Delgado eventually got hurt. He's one of the main reasons why the LA Galaxy probably didn't make the playoffs down the stretch. By the way, every person that you talk about that gets injured or out, there's multiple ways that you can sort of say how it affects the team. But in general, the real way it affected the team was that they had this giant conglomeration of injuries that they eventually couldn't overcome.
It was holes. It was gaps in the field.
Absolutely.
We're talking about best 11s when, take away a best 11 and your defenses literally get weaker. And so that's one of those things there. I'd put him right in that range, 750, 800,000. I feel like, he's the second leading goal scorer on the team.
Yep.
Tied for the leading goal scorer if you want to go by MLS goals only.
Only guy to play every single game this year.
Consistency.
Yep.
Yeah. Can talk about that percentage that you saw from the DP players. Tyler Boyd went above and beyond in that regard. So I think he will be fairly compensated, and I think it will be within that range.
Tyler Boyd played with a torn quad and a broken hand in that season. Still played every single game.
It was still taped up towards the end of the season, right?
Yep.
I imagine he's going to have surgery in the offseason.
I mean, either that or it's one of those things that will heal once he actually stops using it, right? It's one of those. He didn't say he was scheduled for surgery or anything like that. So,
or is he superstitious enough that once it heals, he's still going to wear the tape?
He's going to
good luck. He had a good season
the whole time. I mean, never know. Let's go through some other ones because I have some notes that this means I wrote down notes as they were happening. So this is like a better way to go through the exit interviews than to go through everyone. Maya Yoshida basically said he was embarrassed by the season. Says the off season is going to be weird for him, right? Because he just really got into playing shape. He was talking about that, and he says I'm looking for somewhere in England or Japan to go and train and play while it's sort of off. He's not going to be able to play in real games, but he wants to go and stay in shape in the off season. Yes.
That doesn't happen anymore. Speaking of the Beckham documentary, we were talking about the loans that he had during his time with the Galaxy. We saw it with Landon Donovan. It seems like that doesn't happen like it used to. Did something happen with the MLS structure, or is that something intentional?
I think the amount of games. I think the amount of games they play anymore. There's too much on your body to try to go on loan and then come back and go on loan. And by the way, nobody likes that. Right. And it doesn't really fit the MLS calendar anymore whenever you look at the fact that the games start in February. Right. So it's like you're going to go on loan in wintertime and then you're going to be gone until June. Right.
You're back for the playoff push.
Perfect timing. Right. So expect that Yoshida will be going somewhere and training somewhere, either England or Japan. For some of these guys, I don't want people to freak out because there's already people freaking out. Like Ricky Puig is going to Barcelona. Why is Ricky Puig in Barcelona? Because he lives there. That's where he lives. That's where he's from, right? The whole deal. Calm down. It's okay. Why is Joveljic moving? Because he doesn't want to spend 3 months just hanging out here, right? That's not his thing. Remember, I think last year, in some of the off seasons or maybe the off season before, he stayed out here and I think he worked. I think Sasha Kleshin was part of that whole thing because those two were BFFs and sort of helping him stay in mind. So that's what you have. So just relax. Maya Yoshida expects to be back next season and is really looking forward to coming back and playing. And you can hear it from him. He wants to be back, right? So you're going to have Maya Yoshida. Billy Sharp wants to come back, has a club option. Talk to Greg and talk to the rest of the coaches, but there's no decision on his future yet. We'll stay in LA for a couple of weeks because they're really enjoying my family's really enjoying LA.
Like I was mentioning,
right?
To the Tyler Boyd point, yeah.
And then he's going to head back to England. Says that whenever he goes back to England, that's going to be super weird because they're playing and he's not going to be. And he's like, that was my whole life, like all these years and the whole deal. Yeah. So I thought that was interesting. Eric Zavaleta said continuity matters whenever he was talking about the defense and everything else. That's a Greg Vanney line as well. Says that Greg kept the team together throughout the turmoil this year. I will say this because people, again, I'm the Greg Vanney homer. That's what I hear all the time. We told you, remember whenever there were people saying that Greg lost the team? Oh, he lost the team. Oh, he lost the team. It's horrible. The locker room's a mess. Everything's a problem. Remember, because there were people complaining about each other. Like there were some players talking, right? Yes.
Wait, that wasn't this season though, was it?
Well, yes. Oh yeah, it was this season. It was.
I feel we've had 5 seasons in this season.
It was during the downturn and everything.
Because I remember it was the Derek Williams, right?
That was one I think from the previous season.
Last season.
Yeah. But
there was a rift, possibly.
Yeah. But there was times this year, possibly wherever it happened. Here's the thing is that obviously people are going to go, well, Eric Zavaleta's his nephew. Of course he's going to say that. That's his meal ticket. And by the way, that's the same for all these guys. Anything they say about Greg Vanney has to be put through a lens of these guys are all expecting to come back and get game time. So they're not going to throw Greg Vanney under the bus, right? Agreed. 100%. I will just tell you this. There are a lot of pretty impassioned arguments about Greg Vanney in these. And if you think it's just like lip service, then I guess you can dismiss that. But multiple players, when they were asked about Greg, had nothing but glowing things to say him. Uri Rosell was talking. This one's kind of cool that I thought was. He was like, he goes, I love playing for Greg. He goes, it's crazy that I played for Peter Vermees and Greg Vanney. And he goes, they both have different styles, but they prepare you so well. He goes, and it's crazy that I got to play with two of the best managers in Major League Soccer, right? when everybody in LA Galaxy land is sitting there talking about how bad Greg Vanney is and he's a horrible manager and all this stuff, just know that there are people around the league who consider Greg Vanney one of the top managers in Major League Soccer. Easily, hands down, not even a question, right? So among the elite managers in Major League Soccer. That doesn't mean he can't suck here, by the way, Eric.
Yeah, that's where I was going to say. I never, and that's why I'm kind of not surprised or shocked by it. I don't remember feeling like he ever lost the team this season.
Nope.
The team
it
lost.
Never happened.
The team lost the games.
Yes.
That's what happened. The team didn't perform. The team didn't live up to expectations. I don't feel like I don't think that was they were turning on Vanney or explicitly disobeying him and sabotaging the team and doing this or that. I never got that feeling from the team this season. So I'll say that. But if people had that take, I never seemed to get that vibe like he lost the locker room or that the players were never in line with what he wanted. The only I guess the only player that you could probably say that was maybe Efra Alvarez because he eventually got shipped out. He wasn't in team sheets and things like that. And you can kind of read between the lines where that was going.
If you want to know who that next guy is, who's sort of like on the edge of being shipped out, Adam Saldana is that guy. Just telling you right now that they expect him to take. By the way, I think he was Defender of the Year
for G2.
G2, yeah. Right. But I guessed correctly on all of I got my ballot was correct. That was the correct one. Ricky Puig won Player of the Year. It was Caligari who won Defender of the Year, and Jaylen Neil won Humanitarian of the Year. Ricky Puig won the Golden Boot. He was tied with Tyler Boyd, but then they went to overall goals, not just MLS season, all competitions, right? And it was 9-8 in that whenever it came. So Ricky had one more goal. So Ricky won Golden Boot. So there's that.
And Ricky also did have the tiebreaker in terms of assists as well. So if they wanted to go to another one, yeah, if they didn't want to do co-golden boots, they could have. He would have still had the edge even with the regular season.
Zavaleta said he was talking about the injuries because people were asking, are these injuries something that you guys can train out of? And we have somebody in our Discord who is a sports medicine, works in the sports medicine field. So we get a lot of insight on the Discord, which is one of the reasons why you should join the Discord. So Cam on the Discord gives us a lot of really great insights. He's doing internships with a whole bunch of colleges and different things. He can tell us all about recovery times and everything else. And even he was like, there's not much you can do to train out of these giant ACL injuries. And by the way, there were two contact injuries. Ricky Puig's injury, where he hurt his ankle, was a contact injury. And then the other one was Martin Caceres. His season-ending injury is a contact injury, not a non-contact injury. But really, there's not a lot you can do in these situations to prevent the kind of injuries that the LA Galaxy had. Greg Vanney pointed out that every single one of those injuries happened in a game, not in training, in a game, right? So it was
to the Caceres point, it's a contact injury, but it's kind of a freak. How often do you bump knees and
did you hear what Greg said
get
about
stepped on? That happens so often.
Right.
For it to shatter a kneecap, the chances of that happening are so low. So while it is a contact, it's not like he was pushing it too hard, he overextended himself. I think the only argument you could make for that is maybe Chicharito, but at the same time, freak in nature and in terms of the impact that it has on the team. So even the contact injury, was tricky. You can't call it like a run in the mill, something that the training staff or that they could have trained differently or done something differently that could have prevented it.
Let's see. Raheem Edwards back next year per his contract, said results are embarrassing, mentions that they tied the most goals allowed as the team in 2017. The players were very aware of the amount of goals that they gave up this year. They're usually very aware of the stats that are sort of out there whenever we start putting them out there. They pay attention to social media.
Yeah. And I'll shout out Raheem Edwards. When Julian Ade came in, I thought that Edwards was officially cooked. I thought, his time, he didn't show flashes to where, he couldn't be replaced. And I think after Ade came in, there was a noticeable difference in his performance and what he brought to the team. He won Lars Player of the Year. Lars gives out their Player of the Year award, and he won that award. I think in terms of playing for the crest and whatever that means to you, having that passion going out there, he showed that this season. And I think part of it was the feet were to the flames. He knew that there was someone ready to take his job if he didn't perform. And I think he lived up to the hype and really, shut up the haters. Anyone who had questions about him, I think he showed that he deserved to come back next season and probably should be a starter on this team.
He's an interesting one. He talked about how he's coming back. He wants to get better. There's some things he wants to work on. Like he was, by the way, one of the first guys who I thought was honest about the boycott and everything that sort of went on, which was he said it affected him, right? And it affected the players and it affected the team. And I want to talk just right on that point here in a second, but let's get through some of these other ones. That way we can actually move the show forward a little bit. We talked to Tyler Boyd, Uri Rosell out of contract. He said psychologically it was difficult to get points, but not gain ground, right? Remember when the Galaxy were like getting points and we're like, oh man, they're on the run. Here it comes, right? You could feel it. They're going to climb out of 13th, but they kept like, there were a couple times, Greg Vanney even mentioned it. He said there were a couple times when if we would have won, we would have like moved up. And he goes, and psychologically, that would have been so important for us. And it never happened, right? It never kicked. Yeah.
I have a game we can play. I don't know if, you talked about moving the show forward, and I don't know if we want to do it now while we're on the topic, or maybe we can, do it a little bit later. But they were 8 points shy of a playoff spot. And so where can you find those 8 points? I kind of have looked through. Vanney mentioned some of it.
Right.
I feel like I can find those 8 points if you want to play that game and
easily.
Go through it.
You could absolutely find those 8 points. That's the thing. I think you could find easily 5 wins if you just go in there and right?
Well, I did it. I found 12 points.
Go ahead.
I found 12 points.
Go ahead.
Home opener versus Vancouver. There was a Ricky goal called back for VAR. There was a Joveljic handball that goes from a draw to a win. That's +2. Home versus Seattle. A really weak shot from Leo Chu. That plays out a little bit different. Instead of a loss, that's a draw. That's +1. Charlotte at home. They concede late. Chicharito red card. Just kind of a weird situation with the boycott going on still. If that's a draw instead of a loss, that's +1. Home versus SKC. They gave up a late penalty, 90 +1. They gave up a penalty to Alan Polito. So instead of being a draw, if that's a win, that's now +2. Away at San Jose. Remember, they had an 89th minute penalty, which was a clear penalty, and VAR somehow reversed it, that it was not a penalty.
Right.
So if that ends in a win instead of a draw, another 2, +2 there. Home versus Portland, that ended up being a 3-3 draw. I'm getting iffy on this one, but if Zavaleta doesn't get the own goal, kind of that freak incident, maybe they win that 3-2. That's +2. And then home versus RSL, all those missed chances in the first half with Billy Sharp, point blank. If that's a win instead of a draw, then you're looking at 12 points. But if we're conservative, say 8 to 10 points,
right, easily.
That's above the playoff line, and they're in the mix, even with everything that went wrong.
Right.
You can go through and kind of pick through those little points there.
I wanted to get to Ricky Puig. We talked about it. He said, and these are all translated, so I could play you the audio, but you'd be listening to Vicky Mercado, who's in charge of the LA Galaxy PR department there. And not so much Ricky, but he goes, with losses, you learn more and more. And I think this year we had a lot of losses, so a lot of learning lessons. And, it's easier to just press delete, start fresh. We had a lot of injuries, the fight, injuries, the fight with the fans, the boycott, our president and all that. So he sort of lists off all of these things that sort of go in there. The funniest part was, and this is worth watching the video for, is Scott French asked him, he goes, well, are you happy here in Los Angeles, right? Like, do you want to stay type of question.
We're still asking that question.
They are. Well, I mean, I think it's important to ask. I think it's an important question to ask because it's, all I ever see on Twitter and Instagram and everything is that Ricky Puig is going to leave because he's sick of the LA Galaxy. And I kept saying, no, he loves it here and he wants to be here and he wants to be with the LA Galaxy. It was funny because Ricky walked in, and whenever he comes in, this is probably before even the video starts, but he walks in and he goes to sit down, and Scott French goes, you're going to do it in English, right? And he goes, oh, next year, I'll do it in English next year. He's speaking in English, right? He goes, next year, I'll do it in English. But by the way, he speaks excellent English, like perfect, better than you and I, easily. So the whole day he goes, next year. He goes, next year. And he goes, like next year, January? He goes, I need to speak in Spanish today because I need to express myself, right? Like the whole day. And we're like, okay.
That's a fair answer. That's a good response.
I understand it. We're like, we understand it. No problems. But Scott, after some questions were asked Ricky, he goes, are you happy here? And Ricky understands all the questions. So Vicky never translates the questions. He hears it in English and he answers it in Spanish. Well, he starts with, of course I'm happy here, right? In English, right? He goes, of course I'm happy here in English. And then he goes on in Spanish. And
that kind of says enough right there. Yeah,
it does. And I thought it was funny. He goes, for sure I'm happy, right? And the whole day goes, and then Vicky's translation goes, I've always been happy, and I've always said in LA has treated me so well, and the fans have treated me as more of this big family that we are, and that I've always said the Galaxy is the biggest team in MLS and will continue to be, just because of, the team's past and the future and what's ahead and important. We are a team, we know, with the most MLS Cups. It's true. It's been a difficult year for all, but we're already working since everything's going on of what's ahead. He goes, and Greg and Jovan and the whole front office, we're going to have a competitive team and be on top again and be one of the top 3 teams in the league. That's sort of where Ricky thinks that they should be. So really interesting in all that. The other part of this is he talks about Greg Vanney. He goes, Greg, I've always said, I have full confidence with him. I'm here because of him and thanks to him. And, he's been a coach. He's a coach because he can give the Galaxy a lot, and he's helped me a lot personally, even with things off the field as well. He's a great guy, a nice guy. He's always has that psychological aspect maybe that some coaches don't have, and he's just an amazing person, a great coach, in my opinion, who can give us a lot. And all of us here at the Galaxy, we trust him, and we know he's setting up a good team for next year, and he has my support 100%. All right.
Thanks.
That's
very nice. That's a glowing review. I wish someone would talk about me like that.
I mean, and again, you could say whatever you want, but Ricky Puig is in a position where he could go play in a lot of places, right?
That's a great point. This is a great counter argument to those who are saying, well, Eric Zavaleta is only going to see nice things. That's his nephew. And then players who are itching for playing time are not going to throw him under the bus. But Ricky Puig can tell Greg Vanney to go kick rocks, and he'll still start every single game because you need that level of talent. It doesn't matter what this guy says. Right. That guy's going to be on the field. So the fact that he says it, you're right. That does carry a lot of weight in terms of, him being in the position where he doesn't have to talk up the guy. He can say, in Europe, there were different styles. And so it's just making adjustments and this and that. You can kind of read between the lines if he wasn't happy with what he was getting from Greg Vanney. So, it does mean a lot to when you put it through that lens.
Mark Delgado, I told you have to go listen to his interview. I mean, there's some good things in there. He talks about that he ended the year with a concussion symptoms and that type of thing. He said he didn't feel it until after the game, so a lot of people question, well, he played through the game that he got the concussion in. He said he did not feel that he had any symptoms being concussed until after the game, and after the game, he said that he started feeling dizzy and doing some stuff. I can't remember which game it was.
I was going to say, did they ever pinpoint when it happened? Because I don't remember a collision. I don't remember anything. And after he was out with a concussion, and I don't know if this is cold or not, but I don't know that anyone ever went back to go see where it may have occurred. Yeah,
I'm sure they pinpointed. I'm sure he knows. We did not ask, and I forget sort of what it was, but he talked about the concussion. He also talked about, remember, he had an ankle sprain, right? And it was one of those that took a while to come back. And we were sort of wondering what happened. He goes, I was diagnosed with a high ankle sprain. And he goes, and so it was one of those where I started to work back and I've started to get better. He goes, but I hit a like edge, or a plateau, and I wasn't getting better anymore. And he was like, what's going on? And whenever they reevaluated it, they found that not only was it a high ankle sprain, but it was also a low ankle sprain. He played on that ankle for, much of the year whenever he was coming out. The concussion was the one that sort of knocked him out. And he goes, just when I was feeling good, I sort of got concussed and then had to miss the rest of the games. That is a sort of microcosm for the LA Galaxy this year. Diego Fagundes, interesting story, because here you have a guy who's so embedded with Austin, coming back and playing for the LA Galaxy, never really seems settled with this team, right? And I think a lot of people are questioning his $900,000 price tag and everything else that sort of goes along with him, and say, is he going to be a flop? And is there a reason that Austin sort of launched him? I asked him, because I wanted to know. I go, it feels like you never really got settled here. I go, did you ever feel like you fully got moved away from Austin this year? He goes, it was really tough because he goes, we're not living in a house, we're living in an Airbnb, so we don't really have a house of our own to go back to. He goes, I had a baby 11 days before they transferred me to the LA Galaxy, right? Just remember sports.
That's a mental, right? I was gonna say, going back to my parenting thing, and it's not as easy. It's easy to critique the thing on the field, but then when you look through it, from that perspective, and that's crazy.
Yeah. So, I think that what you're going to find is that when he finds a house, when he's settled, when he's sort of in this room, I think Diego Fagundes can be a really good player for the LA Galaxy. So I think I'm bullish on Diego Fagundes and everything that he has. Plus he sounds like AJ De La Garza. So I'm
you're going to pull up the chart again. Is he have an option, or did they?
Oh, he's here. He's here. Yeah.
Okay.
Diego Fagundes, let's see. He's up near the top. So he's 5. Austin signed him to a new deal this year.
Okay,
His
so
last
that's what it
year
was.
is 2025, but then he has a club option for 2026. So
Okay.
at the end of the 2025 season, that's whenever Diego Fagundes is out of here, and he's $1 million player.
Yeah, because the reason I was asking is because, to your point, he was so embedded in Austin and, a part of the fabric of that club. I wasn't sure if, maybe the trade was, a chess move where
Right.
they knew he had a contract coming up and maybe they can get him at a
you could get
discount.
him back, yeah.
But thank you for clarifying that,
Yeah.
sir, with your charts.
With my charts, yes, absolutely. happy to help out. That's why we have it. It was maybe a 10-day-old baby. It wasn't 11 days. I think 10 days I wrote down.
Good correction there.
Yeah,
It makes all the difference.
yeah,
Yeah,
it does.
So that makes the trade okay now, actually.
Now let's talk about Douglas Costa. And there's two things that I want to say about Douglas Costa's interview. One is it's all a lie, so you don't need to listen to it. See, I never said once, listen to Douglas Costa. Because unless he was talking about this season, anything he talked about for the future or anything else was all BS. And the reason I can confidently say that is
Tell us how you really feel. Josh.
Yeah. The reason I can confidently say that is because instead of just telling us whenever he came in for the interviews and instead wasting our time, letting me ask questions about it, letting everybody ask questions about it, he could have just come out and said, I'm not coming back. Because approximately 2 hours after he spoke, the LA Galaxy put out a thank you. Fabrizio Romano was out there saying that Douglas Costa has decided not to come back to the LA Galaxy, which is a bunch of baloney. The guy doesn't have a contract, so he didn't decide anything. The Galaxy weren't going to bring him back. The Galaxy said that they announced that the club has parted ways with the designated player Douglas Costa, who is out of contract and who will not return to the LA Galaxy in 2024. Unfortunately, Eric, I wasted actual questions trying to figure out contract information. So
Man,
Douglas Costa...
Douglas, again, not Doug. Douglas
No.
really got under your skin.
Doug,
for that.
it makes me angry whenever you waste time like that. Like, it's going to come in 2 hours. Just announce it there, because it wasn't like we would have said something and then you could have done the whole rigmarole and gone through and said thank you and the whole deal, and we would have asked different questions.
It would have been that could have turned into a rear end kissing fest if he said he was leaving. Then he can get his flowers on his way out the door. That could have been a ploy for him to do that, but obviously he didn't take that. So
Right.
Yeah, interesting. We were talking about this. It was the topic of almost every single show towards the end of the season with how good Douglas Costa is playing. Do you bring him back? And I think you and I both were on the no, you don't bring him back.
Nope.
Train, and it seems like the Galaxy was on that same train of thought as well. So, once again, we were right. All of our guaranteed to be wrong predictions on that particular topic. You can thank him for how well he played and appreciate him.
Right.
But over the course of his 2 seasons, 8
Nope.
goals, 12 assists,
Nope.
and 51 games
Nope.
over 2 seasons. That's not production from a DP level player, and that's not just the production, but just not being on the field for the amount of games that he missed as well. It's an issue. I think Kevin Baxter always mentioned that Greg Vanney had mentioned that he's going to treat him like a sports car and use him in certain spots. I don't know that the sports car got to hum a little bit towards the end there, but it was parked in the garage for the majority of his tenure here at the LA Galaxy.
It was just, I mean, somebody asked me, like, and I think somebody was trying to take a poll, like, what grade would you give Douglas Costa from 1 to 10? And I give him a 4. And the reason is that whenever he was not playing, he was a 0, right? Like, he was nothing. And remember, he showed up at the beginning of the year. We didn't even think he wanted to play. We're like, this guy's checked out. He doesn't want to be here mentally, like all these things. Now, that can offset whenever he started to play, because when he started to play, I would give him 9s and 10s and what he was able to do and how he was able to affect games. And if you had 2 years of Douglas Costa doing that, I would have gladly sat here and said 9 or 10, right? Like, I mean, think of Sophie, who said that Douglas Costa still has enough to be able to be that guy. And then we never see it. And then all of a sudden there's a flash at the end and you're like, oh my God, he really could have been that guy the whole time. Except Greg Vanney said, he didn't find the joy in the game until later, right? Maybe it was just too many clubs. I think he said too many clubs in so little time just didn't allow him to get better with injuries, and it took a while for everybody to square him up in injuries. But what are you doing signing that guy if that's the case, right?
Well, that's a whole different question, but yeah.
I mean,
I'll ride on Sophie's coattails that I went through the whole gambit of emotions with Doug Costa. I said he's going to be the guy. He's going to be like a Zlatan.
Right. People
have given up on him. He's going to tear up the league. He has that kind of talent. Then he flopped. I said he was completely done. He's washed. There's no way he's going to give anything to the team. And he did have something to give to the team, but it just wasn't nearly consistent enough to be worth bringing him back.
The final person in here, Jaylen Neil. Go watch Jaylen's interview. And one is just so that way you understand what a professional Jaylen Neil is at, what is he, 19, 20? Like, I can't, I forget what he is. And I'm always like, because he seems like he's a 25-year-old veteran on this team.
He does carry himself
like
that.
He's 20 years old right now, right? So he does. He feels like he's a veteran in the whole deal. Now, people are talking about Jaylen Neil, and Greg Vanney talked about Jaylen Neil, saying, we saw Jaylen and we said, yeah, he's going to get some minutes and we'll see how he plays. Like, that was his thought coming into this year. And then he's like, and then he went out and played, and he was like, basically making me like, I couldn't take him off the field. Like, how do you take him off the field? He's playing so well. And he goes, and that's what you like to see. So in 2024, we know Jaylen's going to be a part of where we expect him to be, which is one of those starting center back type things, right? So it's really, I heard people saying like, oh, well, Jaylen had his breakout year and don't expect him to stay with the LA Galaxy so long. Expect Jaylen Neil to be here for the next 2 to 4 years easily, because he didn't have his breakout year this year. We've learned that he could play this year, right? We learned that the step up in competition was something, but the injury really set him back from having the breakout that you want him to have. Next year is really going to be, one, he comes in with more expectations, but two, when he meets those expectations, which I expect him to, that's going to be his breakout season.
And I think I talked about this on last week's show as well, that, you kept waiting for the other shoe to drop to see that dip in performance, and it never really fully got there. But so it reminds me kind of, we make this comparison all the time to Julian Araujo, someone who's going to have people coming after him. Julian Araujo, his last season with the Galaxy, the year before was his breakout, and he had a tough time living up to those expectations. And it's not that he wasn't playing well, it's that the expectations were pushed that much further, that he wasn't doing that consistently every single game. So it made us judge him more harshly. So I think Neil has that potential where it's now, we're not just going to be happy to see, oh, look at the feel good story, Jaylen Neil's starting on this team. How great is that he got a starting spot? It's now you're the starter on this team, and there are expectations that are going to come along with that. And then the last point that I'll mention with it, and it kind of ties in with my Yoshida, being that pairing with him. You can scoff at your Eric Zavolettas and your Tony Alfaros if you're bringing them back. But if you have a healthy Maya Yoshida and Jaylen Neil, you're not going to need to rely on Eric Zavaleta for a lot of games. You're gonna see him in the Yuri Rosell spot where hopefully they don't see a lot of minutes. They come in at the end of games. Right. They come in during international duty, so maybe 5 to 8 games total. That they put in spells. If Yoshida and Neil are healthy for 25 to 30 games, then you don't put you and me back there at center back to backfill, because you're going to have those wins and that consistency where you're going to have success on the field if they're on the field together for most of the time.
Well, I want to get to, I'm not going to play you much of Greg Vanney's stuff just because it's an hour long. Like, you really have to, and some of his questions and answers are like 20 minutes long.
Yeah,
right?
He doesn't have a short response.
No, there's not a lot of short responses. I will say that he talks about Chicharito. He talked about Douglas Costa. He talked about the fact that he needs people who are available. He talked about a different approach to how they're looking at things with the Leagues Cup in there, and with how condensed the first part of the season is with all those games next to each other. He goes, you don't have to, you need to have a team that is together before the season starts. And so I think that's going to be a real focus for the LA Galaxies, to bring the guys in that they need before the season starts. And that seems to be changing things. He also said, Greg Vanney's famous for saying, it's really the last, 10 games of the season where you really have to be on it. And he's sort of changed that. He goes, you cannot start out slow. And there are a lot of the guys who are like, you can't start out slow, right? With Leagues Cup and everything else. Yeah.
And even this last stretch, the Galaxy, we always touted that middle run. Hey, they were, unbeaten for so long, or, out of, that streak where they had a bunch of draws and only one loss in a matter of like 10 games or something like that when you look at it. But when you look at the last 6 games, winless in the last 6, losses in the last 3 out of 4, that's 6 games. In a 34-game season, that's 17%, of the season. That's enough. That's enough to bury you. So even that last stretch, those last 6 games, and then if you take that opening, the opening 7 games, right? Where they were winless, that's enough to bury your season. That's 13 games out of 34. That's enough. Yeah. So it doesn't matter how well you play. You can nearly go undefeated in that middle stretch, and if you don't perform, in these stretches, then that's where you're going to run into it. And that's why I drove us crazy with the Vanney 3-game win streak. Just put a win streak together, and then we won't have this problem. Just win and you don't have to win every single game, but put some 3-gamers in there.
I brought up the points per month chart only because it shows where the wins are, it shows where the losses are, it shows where the draws are. It really does. If this doesn't illustrate how non-winning the LA Galaxy were this season, only 8 times, right? You can go count all the W's right there.
That's tough. That's a bad look when you see it.
It is
like that. Yeah,
it is. Now there's a lot of draws in there, right? And there's a lot of losses, right? But when you look at just the wins, the outright wins, 8 times this season, where you could really feel positive after an LA Galaxy game, right? 8 times did they get the job done in the whole thing. And obviously that needs to be a lot better. I did get to ask Greg Vanney this one question. I'll play you some of this, but I would implore you to go and listen to the videos, or you can go on Instagram where I pulled the entire 3-minute clip. He talks for about 3 minutes, but we'll play some of it. But my question, as I think is appropriate in this particular case, is why are you still the guy? Why do you think you still belong here? And if you're Greg Vanney, this is not a getcha question, right? Because the problem is that all the fans out here, everybody who's in our chat room, everybody wants to know why he still thinks that he's the guy. And so many times we've talked about it, Eric, about having sort of that self-responsibility. If you're not the guy, then get out of the way, right? Like if you don't believe that you're actually the guy, then get out of the way. So many times that was sort of said about Chris Klein and everything else that was going on, is like you stayed past where you're supposed to be. Everybody knows that you're grasping and holding on here. So, Chris Klein, why should you still be the president of the LA Galaxy? And I'm sure he'd have an answer for you, but you have to ask these questions. And so I did ask Greg Vanney about this, and I said, hey, why do you believe you're still the guy? Which, by the way, feels very much like a job interview question. Like, so why would you like to work here?
Exit interview, it kind of says it right there. I mean, that is partially what's happening. Yeah.
I would like to make it very clear, because I think some people think that I have some sort of malice for Greg Vanney by asking this question. That's not it at all. As a matter of fact, all my interactions with Greg have been outstanding.
If you don't ask the question, you'd get creamed for it as well. Yeah.
I would, but I think there's a lot of people. And then there's another part of this. If you don't like Greg Vanney, you won't like this answer because you don't like Greg Vanney. If you are more, I think, neutral than I am, or believe that he should come back, then I think this is a perfectly reasonable answer on all parts. So here's Greg Vanney answering my question in the press conference. Let's see if we can get this.
And who you are as a coach, or your ability to be.
Think that you're still the best guy for this job?
Because if you look at history as a coach, also I have a ton of consistency of not only just getting to the playoffs, but getting to the finals, winning a championship. I know what it takes to win in this league. I think if you look at any club and other coaches who also are in this league and have won championships, they have seasons that are these outlier seasons where they have injuries, they have issues, they have challenges. Many teams prior to the introduction of the Leagues Cup, which was very new this year, you would see a lot of teams who played in Champions League who would have very difficult seasons, injury issues, very good coaches who also struggled when they went through these types of challenges. I don't think these challenges define who you are as a coach or your ability to be successful. They define the challenges of this particular season, and that we were not able to get on the right side of these particular challenges for many reasons. But doesn't take away sort of my knowledge and vision of the game and my ability to lead these players. Not once did you hear a player turn around and say that we weren't moving in the right direction or that things were not good. Every one of them was behind it and believed in the process, believed in what we were trying to do. That's the first most important thing.
All right, he has many more things. So again, go listen to it, and then you can sort of make up your own mind about it. But really, it's worth the entire Greg Vanney interview, which is over an hour, is worth listening to, and I would suggest that people do that. Yeah,
I will, to give the other side of the coin, for those who are critical of that response and what he was saying in terms of knowing what it takes to win in the league and having success of taking teams to the playoffs and, getting to finals. That's the one thing that I think people dug into and picked apart. And I think probably fairly, he talked about, outlier seasons. He's only been with the Galaxy for 3 seasons. He's only made the playoffs 1 out of those 3 seasons.
Right.
So the outlier is the playoffs, not seasons like this. I understand what he's saying.
He's saying in the bonus, we're in the balance of his time.
In his time, yes. But we're not giving him the
Toronto.
credit for the Toronto
Right,
years.
right.
We're not glad that he was able to take Toronto to finals and that he was able to have success there and know what it takes to win in the league. We want to see, if you know what it takes to win in the league, then win in the league.
Win the league,
Get,
right.
and, make it happen. And the last thing that I'll say is asking the tough questions and, maybe some people thinking about, his attitude to responses or being touchy or defensive or whatever it is. The team finished in 13th place. They missed the playoffs. They were never above the playoff line. I don't think any reasonable person would expect glowing questions and saying, "Hey, tell us about how great." I think you have to understand.
Right.
You're gonna get tough questions asked to you, and you got to be ready to respond to that. So I do think he responded to it.
Greg knew that
Again,
question
to your
was
point,
coming.
you don't have to like it. You don't have to not like it, but you have to know they were coming.
Greg knew that question was coming, and if he
Yeah.
didn't, then he'd be an idiot, and he's not an idiot, so he knew it was coming, right? Like, it's all those things, and I can tell you that 100%. By the way, $5 super chat from Gary. Thank you guys for yet another rad show. Shout out to the 200s. Love y'all up there in the 200s. Always good spot to watch a game, by the way. Get that nice camera view from up above. Good spot. Ezra, $2.
Underrated section. Shout
Yeah.
out to you, Gary.
Yeah, Ezra, $2 super chat. Douglas looked angry the whole interview. Typical. He usually does look angry. I don't know that is. He's got resting angry face, right? That's sort of where he's at. Which, by the way, Douglas Costa playing against me would scare me. I'm just saying. He's a big dude.
And I apologize. It was mentioned somewhere a little bit after the chat, but shout out to you, Ezra, for bringing it up. That someone mentioned that Douglas played to prove the fans wrong, and that's when he turned it on. When the fans kind of turned his back on him, that's when he kind of looked good.
Right.
And so while you can credit a player for taking that responsibility on when the going gets tough, the tough get going, and he powered through it. But where was that? Why can't you just do your job and play well? Because that's what the expectation is. You
Right.
shouldn't have to be slighted to turn it on. Like that should just be your gear as a professional. We talked about Jaylen Neil. He has one gear. It's being a professional and doing his job. That would have been nice if Douglas Costa could have brought that intensity, that anger, that chip on his shoulder. He was coming from, being, essentially, thrown out of these clubs, where no one wanted him. He should have had that anger, that chip on his shoulder throughout his entirety, to make more money elsewhere. If even that was the end goal, we should have been seeing him playing out of his mind, to get that big money move somewhere else.
Right. No, and could have been. By the way, the question about Greg Vanney and sort of saying, "Hey, why do you think you should still be here?" Was always going to be a question that was asked, which is why whenever people, just one person, one moron, who went after me and was like, after the Minnesota game when I asked about VAR instead of things, instead of asking like, "What do you think you still deserve to be the coach for this?" There's a reason for all of this, right? There's appropriate times to ask for questions, and I can only ask about VAR in Minnesota one time. Right after the Minnesota game. That was it. That was the only time. I knew this question was coming the whole time because I knew we were going to get exit interviews, or at least I hoped we were going to get exit interviews, and that even
or
if not,
season finale.
yeah, or season finale, or you and I were going to have Greg Vanney on, right? Like there was going to be a time to ask him this question. So that's why. All right, that's called being a professional, knowing what your job is. Right, and knowing when to ask the questions, when not to ask the questions, what is coming. Greg Vanney gave a much better answer, by the way, during this exit interview than he would have given after the Minnesota game. All right, so that's why you do this. All right, I'm not a newbie, been here for 15 years. Just remember that. Let's talk now. Greg
What a
Vanney,
flex,
I got
what a
receipts.
flex.
I got receipts. Don't worry.
That was a Douglas Costa end of the season level performance.
By the way, does not actually make me angry about Douglas Costa. It's sort of like, dude, just waste my time. Like I was doing my real job and doing exit interviews for 4 hours.
You were sitting
right?
in 2 staff meetings.
Right?
Yeah.
I was jumping all over the place. So like, don't waste my time, bro. So that's it. Now, one of the main themes that came through from Greg Vanney, from everybody, and by the way, Alex Ruiz asked an excellent question to Greg Vanney about the fan boycott, and Greg was like, "Oh, well, I'm tired of answering this question." It's like, "Oh, well, too bad." It's one of those. It's like, yeah, you get to answer it anyway.
You have to know this question is coming.
And Alex's follow-up was just spot on too. Alex is like rising star, man. He's going to be better than everybody else in that press room here pretty soon. But Alex asked the question. Yeah, it wouldn't be hard. Not past me. But the common theme was talking about the boycott. The players talked about it and everything. Now, I see people reacting to this. Like I see fans reacting to this. Like, oh, they're blaming me for the season. No, they're not blaming you for the season. All right. And quite honestly, if you were part of the boycott, your goal in this entire thing was to disrupt, to cause pressure, to put pressure on the front office. And in my mind, at least, you were 100% successful. You put pressure on the front office. Now, the front office, in turn, put pressure on the players to bail them out of it, right? And put pressure on Greg Vanney to do it. So when these guys talk about how the home games didn't feel like it, yeah, they weren't supposed to because you guys were boycotting. That's how this works, right? You set the fire to kill the rats, right? That's what you were trying to do. You knew that if you set the fire inside the house, you might burn down the house, right?
Yeah.
You burn down the house a little bit. That's okay.
And you cause some damage along the way as well. And I think
that's okay.
You can't mention one without the other, but you're right. Looking in goal, was the goal accomplished? Yes. Mission was accomplished. They said they weren't taking into account what the fans' demands were or what they were bringing to the table. But then as then a statement came out. If they don't make the playoffs, then I'll do this. So obviously something changed. Then it was, we're not going to change. He was just hired and, we're going to remain our course. And then he stepped down eventually. So obviously something happened behind the scenes. The boycott did provide enough pressure, whether it was the discussion around the boycott or the boycott itself. It did its job in the regard to, moving the club forward away from a front office that was keeping, not just in my opinion, from a lot of people's opinions, and the whole purpose, it was holding the club back.
Right.
So mission accomplished in that regard. But I think some of the sour and bitterness, because I'll mention this as well, it did bring out an ugly side from, some sections of the fan base as well, with kind of pointing fingers and some attacks that were unnecessary.
Pressure.
And to your point of the burning, there were some relationships that were burned along the way as well. And I think that needs to be acknowledged as well. And so that's something that's going to take some time to repair those relationships. And I think that's something that people need to have patience and consideration when thinking about that boycott as well. Mission accomplished. We could all say, it worked in that regard, but there were some tactics and things that maybe didn't sit well with a lot of people, and they have the right to have those feelings as well.
And listen, I think the players get this wrong, right? Which is they're always like, well, yeah, it affected us and the whole deal. Well, I mean, yeah, it was supposed to affect you guys. Don't you understand? I mean, it was supposed to affect the organization. Now, I still believe that Chris Klein tying his future to everything and really piling the pressure on even more. You heard about, again, I talked about Greg Vanney knowing when to put pressure on, when to take it off. For this and for the fan boycott and everything like that, just take it for what it is. I mean, the fact that you were able to, make change happen, and that came about because of the boycott. Again, remember at the very beginning of the boycott, I said I don't think fans should have voices in who gets hired, who gets fired for the most part, right? Because you shouldn't be listening to fans on who to sign. You shouldn't be listening for fans. You should have that mechanism within your organization. But what happens whenever there seems to be no mechanism to get rid of people who shouldn't be there any longer, right? That's why I always thought the boycott was more than justified whenever they were going at it. Like, I get it. Mm-hmm. I understand. Go do it, right? The whole deal. Now you're back into that situation, though, where you don't get to decide who's hired and fired again because you did your thing, you got your stuff, and now we move on from that, right? So there's all these little, there's this balance things. I'll tell you this, though. You should, and this is from me being within that organization and seeing what is going on and seeing all the things that have happened for years and years, you should be excited about the direction the LA Galaxy are facing right now. I know that's hard to say whenever you finish 13th and you don't make the playoffs and you're watching, Sporting Kansas City play San Jose in the world's most boring game, but then it ends up being an exciting shootout, but San Jose can't shoot out. So it was just, one of those weird things that sort of happened, right? And you're not in that, right? It's a lot better to be in the playoffs and at least playing in that game than getting knocked out, than not ever having the chance to do that. I understand that. That being said, Vanney said it, and I'll say it too. From everything that I've seen, from the people I've talked to, from the amount of effort that has gone into this offseason already, I would feel positive about where the LA Galaxy are pointed for 2024. And everybody knows, massive year. Everybody knows, massive year. It's not like people are going, oh, it's not really that big a year. No. They're like, massive year. Everybody has been saying it. So within the organization, they are aware of how critical and crucial this can be. By the way, Angel, a $5 super chat says, shout out to my homie Kevin. Looking forward to the 2024 season. We got shout outs going in here too.
Yeah,
That's
shout out
good.
to Kevin.
Hey, Kevin.
I laughed a little bit as well because I don't know if we're it says it in the super chat, Kevin Garcia.
Right. I didn't know if I was supposed to say his last name.
But the reason why I mentioned that is it's such a common name, both first name and last name. I feel like 10 people got a shout out there's got to be multiple Kevin Garcias out there, who appreciated the shout out.
I'm sure they did.
That was definitely for you, Kevin.
Did we talk about free agents? And I don't think we've talked about free agents yet. Just real quick, we can talk about free agents. The free agents from the LA Galaxy who are up right now: Tony Alfaro, Michael Barrios, Kelvin Leerdam, and Uri Rosell. 3 of those. Everybody except for Michael Barrios are on options, so they might not be free agents because the Galaxy could just pick up their option if they wanted to. I think it's really... Uri Rosell is one of those guys who I thought really came in and proved that he has an important role to play for the LA Galaxy. He's just not a starter. Like, he can't be the guy, but he could be the backup to the guy,
I never know if these are conversations I've had on text with someone or on the phone, or if we've talked about it on the pod. Uri Rosell, great, for what he could bring to the team. But it's sad to say, when it comes to product on the field, he just wasn't the guy. So, in a spot start here and there, but being asked to start multiple games during a stretch of games, I didn't see it on the field.
Liked him. I actually really liked him. I don't agree with you. I would say, and that's fine. I believe that there is enough nuance within his game to not be on the same page with this. But I thought for what he was being asked to do, he did a pretty good job of it, right? And I was like, okay, that's fine. But you're allowed to say that. That's fine.
Here's where I'm comparing him, the drop off from Mark Delgado, from Gaston Brugman, coming in to play that role. It wasn't close, in my opinion. So from that regard, okay.
I agree with that.
So that's where I'm coming from in saying that.
Well, I mean, you sort of look at like Tony Alfaro, or you look at some of the other guys. Chris Mavinga
also not close.
Yeah, Chris Mavinga is one of those guys who actually is one of the guys who might be a starter, right? So
closer.
You should judge him more harshly, in my opinion, that he didn't have a good year this year, right? By the way, I missed one. Philip gave us a $2 super chat. He goes, "Is Siani's McLaren off the books yet?" Oh, shout out to Michael Siani and his McLaren.
I would imagine that that was either short-term loan, or he's definitely sold that thing back to recoup the costs.
Yep. So no, it was all good. So I mean, that's sort of where we sit for the LA Galaxy right now. I don't know. I think the next thing you're going to expect is that Chicharito's not going to come back. I think that's pretty much written.
That's the next shooter drop. Yeah.
And people keep saying, "Oh, well, the Galaxy will offer him TAM." He can go to Chivas in Mexico, and he will make a lot more money than getting TAM with the LA Galaxy. Yeah.
I think this happened towards the end of Zlatan's tenure as well. I think to offer them that is almost more insulting, and so I think there was an offer made to Zlatan, and he took it as an insult, if I remember correctly. So if the Galaxy even do offer it, I don't know. I don't know that they even do that. I think that they say, you know what your worth is. We're not going to meet that. So let's just agree to not do the charade and do this dance where we pretend like this is a possibility.
Right.
Let's just move forward with whatever the next steps are going to be.
And that feels like Greg Vanney said it in his press conference. Basically, he said, "I need guys who are available. I need guys who aren't going to be injured. I need guys, So I really think that they're going to go a little younger. In some respects, I would not be surprised, though, if somebody like Antoine Griezmann, and I know people toss that name around a lot, but he has said he wants to be in Los Angeles. He says he wants to come play. There's going to be the opportunity for the LA Galaxy to give him that money and for him to play, and the Galaxy very well could go down that road. I would not be surprised. And it was something we didn't get to ask, which is hysterical in like an hour-long press conference. I missed some questions. I really wanted to ask Greg Vanney sort of what they thought about 2024 and what they thought the rule changes would possibly be, whether that's a fourth DP, whether that's, just allowing you to have 3 U22 players. He did talk about Chris Klein being one of the guys who was on that product committee and was like one of the only non-owners that was on it. And the fact that he's not there anymore means that the Galaxy don't have an idea of what's coming down the road. And so it puts them at a little bit. So it puts them at a disadvantage. So they're scrambling a little bit where they used to be maybe a little out in the front of it, although it never showed anything that they were out in front of it. So I don't know why they're saying it. But those are sort of the things that sort of popped up in that.
I'll also add, Griezmann is a name that has been thrown around for a long time. Luis Suarez is also a name that's being thrown around.
Miami.
That he's going to be joining Miami. He was rumored to the Galaxy for a hot minute. So I think if the Galaxy were able to land someone like him, that'd be fantastic. But to that point of him possibly going to Miami and why next year is so huge, let's address the elephant in the room as well. Messi came later on in the season. Leagues Cup was really his showcase. But in terms of MLS regular season, starting off with the bang, start to finish, having a lot of eyeballs on it, I think next season is definitely going to be the year for that. with Messi playing a full season and him being kind of a focal point. So if the Galaxy can make some noise and, be in the conversation as one of the top teams, that's going to do them a lot of good brand wise. And I know maybe people don't like to hear that, but that's going to do a lot for their brand and to the name and to getting this club, with a little bit of that stench off. If so many eyeballs are on the league and the Galaxy are top performers, that's going to be so much more massive than just whatever the accolades or the success is for 2024, whatever hardware or trophies they win. It's worth so much more than that because of the amount of attention that the league is going to be getting next season.
Yeah, Joseph Martinez is out at Miami as well. That was another name that people sort of thrown up in the air as somebody who possibly, maybe you bring him out to LA on a designated player contract. Like, there's lots of little things that you can do. And again, it'll depend. Will there just be 2 open designated players? And will one of those have to be a young designated player in order to have the 3 U22 players? That limits you a little bit more in what you're trying to do. Or is it going to be a 4th DP is added, and therefore the LA Galaxy have 3 open designated player spots, and you could still get a young DP? Or they're getting rid of the requirement to have a young DP in order to have 3 U22s. There's a lot of rule changes that could happen that really will affect how the LA Galaxy go out. And that stuff is going to get known here in probably the next month and a half.
Yeah.
Right. Because everybody's planning for the offseason. Everybody's getting ready to make signings. Guaranteed. And I know for a fact the Galaxy are already talking to people to sign. Right. So that's what you're talking about right now. The Galaxy are already in that mode. They're getting ready. They're going to start talking to people who will be available for the winter. And then I would not be surprised, and I'll say this now, is if the LA Galaxy keep one of their designated players in their back pocket for the summer, because the summer transfer window, as we've seen, is a giant one, right?
And Euro 2024 happening, next season as well. So that is a consideration. Some players like to have that as their swan song. So maybe they're towards the end with the contract with their club. They finish that tournament with their country, and then they start looking for, retirement and those other avenues. So that is definitely something to consider. So good times. You know what I hear as you're saying they're looking to sign other players?
What?
Let's fire up the rumor tracker.
Oh, I said this on. Did I tell everybody it was coming back?
I think it was on the Discord.
It was on the Discord, but yes, I announced it to everyone that the rumor tracker will be back this year. All right, so I will do my best. I can't do everything all the time. If you're in the Discord and you're going to drop a rumor, you have to put a link. I will decide what goes on the rumor tracker, what doesn't go. It's really a kingdom that I run in all these respects, but. I will do my best, and I think that I have the ability to suss out some of these and tell you whether or not they're real or not. And if I can do that, then I will add value to the LA Galaxy community by doing that. And if I can't, I'll give you my best guess on why it makes sense or why it doesn't make sense, all right? So that's what it is. 5-star rumors on its way, right? That's what it is. We're ready to rock and roll. Could it be a 5-star rumor coming up for Antoine Griezmann coming in? 5 stars.
Balotelli.
Yep.
Balotelli. Start putting it out there.
1 star. 1 star. Griezmann 5 stars, right? 4 stars. 4 stars right now. If you said it right now, I'd probably put it at 4 stars. Just so you know, just because I think that there could be a lot of heat there. So that's where we're at. I don't know what the schedule is. I don't know if I'm gonna have a podcast on Monday or not. We may. Kevin was out last Monday, so we couldn't do it. That's why we didn't have one on Monday. I'm glad we didn't as well. It was nice to have a little break. We're in the off season now. I tend to usually do more 1 a week than 2 a week. And then usually I go on a break for a little bit. I'm trying to figure out when that break is going to be. So as for right now, you get this podcast, which will be stitched together from 2 different files because we had to stop and start.
Again, time is just a construct, man. Because I'm looking at the clock. I was like, no, we haven't been going that long. There was a little break in there. Yeah, but it hasn't been a short show either. Yeah.
No, it was like there was only like 10-minute break. So we've been going for about 98 minutes if you want to know where it is. So that's where we're going with this. So I will let you know. That's about as best I can do on the Discord, on Twitter. That's where you can find us, and then we'll go on. I want to thank everybody again. I know I said it, but I got to go down on the field and take a picture with the media after the game, and it's pretty special. I will say this.
That's new. That's a nice little tradition, right?
I told Vicky whenever we were all sitting there afterwards, I go, hey, we're going to go take some pictures. Can we go out on the field? And she goes, let's all take a picture. I'm like, yes, we should all take a picture. And they got Robert Mora out there, who I love to death. Robert's great. Photographer for the LA Galaxy, and so he came out and took our picture. We got to stand in the goal, and then we stood like sort of on the 18-yard line, and they shot back behind us. Dignity Health Sports Park is so much bigger than you think it is. When you get out on the field, I was like, yep, this place is way bigger, and the lights were off, so it was like a weird sort of like it was big and looming in the shadows, right? So, but what a special place to be.
Yeah, I've had the opportunity to walk on the field in the Rose Bowl, and it's imagining it filled to the brim with people yelling. Yeah. It is a trip when you realize, again, I think that's our theme for the show is, it's easy to look at it from the outside and have your judgments, but when you sit in it and feel it, it's a different level altogether. So very cool. And shout out to the team at the LA Galaxy for recognizing you guys
that was
and
nice.
letting you do that. Yeah, I feel like this year, as negative as the relationship was with the boycott, I feel like there's been a lot of healing as well with the front office.
I don't blame them for the position that they were put in, right?
Correct.
And
Yes.
I would never. It was tough though. It was definitely tough, and we've talked about that. I told you that I was on the stretcher crew, right? You know that I was on the stretcher crew at one point for the LA
I
Galaxy.
did not know that.
Oh man, you didn't know? Not only was I on a stretcher crew, but I was on a stretcher crew for an LA Galaxy Chivas USA game.
Oh, perfect.
So I actually got to run out onto the field at one point, all the way across the field for somebody who was down. It was a Galaxy player who was down. I forget who it was. It was.
Oh, I was gonna say, how do you not have that name on the ready?
Are you serious? Like,
Or
I
if it
was
was
so nervous. Like they would literally just put like fans into the stretcher crew. Like it was a season ticket perk.
When you see those fail videos of people, now that it all snaps into focus,
Right? I
that
mean,
makes a lot of sense.
I mean, they used to do this for season tickets, and somebody was like, my season ticket rep at the time. This was way back in the day, whenever I had season tickets and was doing the podcast, like early, probably 2010, maybe 2000, right in there, yeah, probably 2010. They were like, hey, do you want to do this? I'm like, yes, absolutely. Be on a field. It was nerve wracking having to run across the field and there's all these players and like, you don't want to hit them. It's way harder than you think it is. We didn't even have to lift anybody up. And then the crazy thing was we had to go off. They pushed us off the other side of the field. So we had to like run all the way down.
Walk around the outside.
And then like we had to make sure we weren't in play. Like we were watching the game and like making sure the whole thing. So yeah, I was on a stretcher crew. Good times. So.
I was gonna say with the Chivas USA game, you could have stretchered out one of the blow up dolls, right?
Yeah,
that was during that era.
That could have been. Yeah, it was definitely during that era. That definitely would have been. All right. Let's see. I think that does it. Eric, tell people where they can find you. Let's get out of here. You good?
All right, I'm good. Yeah, I want to thank everyone as well. Just for another fun season and for covering the team has been a lot of fun. The interactions that I'm able to have on Twitter and on Instagram and to go back and forth with everyone, I really appreciate all the love and support. So shout out to you, Josh, for keeping it running, and shout out to everyone for making this a pleasant experience. So as always, if you want to interact with me, you can find me on everything at HammerEV9 on X, Instagram, TikTok, and Threads. That's at HammerEV and the number 9.
How dare you use the name? It's Twitter. All right.
It's a second in a row if you caught that.
I know. If you're looking for me on Twitter, it's at Jay Gessman, at Galaxy Podcast, of course, at Galaxy Podcast on Threads. All those places on Instagram, anything. You can look for cornerthegalaxy.com. You can be on Corner of the Galaxy on Spotify, Apple, iTunes, anywhere, SoundCloud that you can find podcasts. We will be there for you. All right. Starting to wrap up this 2023 season, getting and stretching now into that 2024 season. When does it start? When we say it starts. That could be just around the corner. All right. For everybody here at Corner of the Galaxy, whether that's Kevin, whether that's Sophie, whether that's Christian Miles, let's see, who else was on? Oh, Alex Ruiz was on this year as well. And of course, Eric, we certainly appreciate you. We thank you for listening. And we will be back very, very soon. For Eric, the Portuguese Hammer Vieira, I'm Josh Pato Gessman. You've been listening. You've been watching to our little Corner of the Galaxy. Have a great one, everybody.
You've been listening to the Corner of the Galaxy podcast on cornerofthegalaxy.com. You can follow the show on Twitter and Instagram at Galaxy Podcast. And be sure to check out and subscribe to iTunes, Stitcher, and Facebook by searching for Corner of the Galaxy. Fans, we thank you for listening, and we ask that you be kind and courteous to your neighbors as you leave the podcast. We thank you for joining us and look forward to seeing you again. Until then, I'm Michael Araujo, and on behalf of the entire Corner of the Galaxy crew, goodbye, everybody.